November 9th, regular meeting of the Windham Southeast School District Board. I have to read a little disclaimer about hybrid meetings, so indulge your patience, please. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some meeting remotely and some are meeting physically. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or a member of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us via email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we will continue the meeting. I also would ask remote members to identify themselves before they speak. We've been remiss in that process. It makes it very difficult for our recorders and for the public following the meeting. So first order of business is the actually some news first, or some information. Just a reminder to the board that Dottie and Mary will be meeting again with Dottie and Mary on Wednesday the 17th at 6 p.m. for our ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops. Dottie and Mary will send the Zoom out in the next few days to let us know, or to get so we know how to log in. And I hope people are looking through the LC reports. We had quite a few this week, and it's working really well, but I would like other people to check into it and see if they agree with my evaluation of it. I'm seeing lots of information in the reports, lots of creativity in the schools, lots of uniqueness. There's no two are the same or even very similar, and a lot of relevance in the conversations. I don't think we could have come up with a better list of things for people to talk about than the things that they're finding in the context of their own school community. So I think I'm really happy with the way that's going. I would love to hear from other people who have the time to read through some of those and see if you agree. So next agenda item is the consent agenda. We have a clerk's report, approval of minutes from October 25th and October 26th, 2021. And we have a warrant for October 12th of $275,219.23. Warrant for October 18th of $39,567.80. The warrant for October 18th is $165,005.68. The warrants for October 25th are $1,937,333.25, and the warrants for November 1st, $862,315.77. Payrolls for October 8th are $1,375,620.99, and for October 22nd, $1,377,994.11. But I have a motion and a second to accept the clerk's report and the finances as the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Moved by Jackie, seconded by Tim. Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing no hands. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Now we have our 10-minute period for public comment for items not on the agenda. If there are things that need further conversation later in the meeting, we will create time at the end of the agenda for that. Are there any comments from the public on items not on the agenda?
You have one hand up from Mindy.
Hello?
Hold on just a second. Okay, great. I didn't get it on my screen. Okay, please, during this and any other comment period, please address the chair and state your name before you speak. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, David Scholes. Thank you. I'm Mindy Haskins Rogers. I'm a BUHS alum. and I'd like to read a statement. It's brief, takes about 3 minutes. I am deeply disturbed that the investigation into abuse at BUHS has dropped completely off the WSESD board's agenda. 4 months have passed since I published No More Secrecy in the Commons, and the district has yet to take action toward accountability for the generations of students who were subjected to grooming and abuse at the hands of Hecker and others at BUHS. I now know of multiple survivors, and the stories of grooming are too numerous to count. I've heard corroboration of Hecker's use of a female student to demonstrate the poem mentioned in my piece, dating from the early 70s and extending over decades. People have commented on how deeply disturbing it was to witness. One word comes up frequently in relation to Hecker. He was notorious. In another passage from the letter quoted in my piece, written by Hecker to one of the survivors, he refers to his notorious sexual past and says, "Yeah, I had other student lovers." Yes, Hecker was notorious. But despite his notoriety as a dirty old man and a perv, the administration at BUHS, which included Steve Perrin as vice principal for a few of those years, found him to be a suitable chaperone for overnight field trips, even after his retirement from 2004 until the investigation in 2009. One former student tells of staying in an apartment with Hecker on an opera trip, where he appeared half naked with a glass of wine and just sat on the couch, arms out and petting his chest. She said she could barely sleep, and the incident haunts her to this day. Bob Kramsky received a copy of that letter in which Hecker refers to himself as a child molester in 2009. And despite being undeniably aware after that point that his former colleague had abused students, Kramsky continued to work with Hecker, directing several of his plays at the Vermont Theater Company over the ensuing years. In 2020, when Kramsky announced his retirement, a survivor wrote emails to both Steve Perrin and then Superintendent Lyle Holliday, pleading with them not to name the auditorium after this man. When neither acted to stop the naming, the survivor wrote, "This is just another example of how the school department has failed victims." The injury was particularly acute because she said she was abused in a room above the auditorium. There have been reports about other teachers too. Comments on social media and an anonymous handwritten letter to an advocate name a former basketball coach and driver's ed teacher who told girls they would get an A if they wore a miniskirt on exam day. Terry Matier, a BUHS alum who went on to play pro basketball, has presented a one-woman show around the country. According to a review in theatermania.com, she's mentioned her high school basketball coach, who during a driver's ed lesson taught her to give him a hand job. It's beginning to look like secrecy was not the problem. People knew. I want to respond to the claims that this is ancient history or that the abuse was limited to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I've done some research, and it is statistically unlikely that Hecker stopped abusing kids. What is statistically likely is that recent victims have not yet reached the average age at which survivors come forward, which is 52, according to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. I am not surprised that Steve Perrin would prefer to focus on a present-day climate survey rather than initiate an independent investigation into this legacy of sexual abuse at his school.
Mindy, I'm
almost done. I'm concluding.
I'm going to have to ask you to
I'm
stop
going to ask you to
accusing-
let me
no.
finish. I
Stop
understand
accusing
why the
people of
board's
things you
lawyer
don't
seems to be
understand. You
using
can finish your
scare
statement,
tactics.
but stop using people's names, please, unless you have
Okay.
an allegation or a charge you
I
want
have
to
any
make
more
formally.
names, but I would like to complete this, please.
Complete it, but do not use anyone's names again, please.
Okay. I understand why the board's lawyer seems to be using scare tactics to nudge the board toward a more controlled process with well-conceived press releases. But if the school and district wanted to avoid triggering people, they should have taken action to stop the abuse. They should have responded supportively to survivors at any point before now. I am urging the board to move forward immediately with a truly independent investigation so that the district can begin steps toward accountability and healing for the entire community, of which its current students are a most vital part. And for decency's sake, rename the damn auditorium.
just a brief statement. I think it's important to say that there has been no change in the board's thinking with respect to this matter and future actions. And people should not confuse this to mean that there has not been progress. We have been working diligently to identify the best ways to proceed. Dozens of people are putting their efforts into figuring out the best way forward so we're able to fully support the needs of the victims of these alleged crimes and the ones that we know are not alleged or we're certain about. So don't be confused that we aren't following up. We are not able to be public about it. Bethany, please be brief. We're at the end of our 10 minutes.
I just wanted to, I guess, echo what Mindy said about the investigation, calling for the investigation. I appreciate that you are working on a survey, but I think it's extremely essential that an investigation take place even before the survey, because I think that there's a bigger issue that the survey is not going to even begin to cover. Also, I wanted to find out, I had mentioned, and I know several others have asked about either a committee or task force to work on this issue so that it can actually be worked on more than just a few minutes here and there at board meetings. And I'm just wondering if or when that will take place so that there can be a more specific and targeted approach to this.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to administrative report. Mark, I think we got the enrollment numbers late, or at least they came on the website, but we didn't get them in our mailboxes. So unless there's something you wanted to talk with us about that, I'd like to put that off to the next meeting.
The enrollment numbers?
Yeah, unless you want to say something. People have had a chance to look at it. We're not. It's interesting to see that we're not following the pattern that we keep hearing about of declining enrollments. But I'd like people to have time to actually look at it and think about it and sit with it for a while.
David?
Okay? Yes. Yes.
So, just in a public comment.
Deborah, identify yourself, please.
Deborah Stanford, community member. So I just have a couple of observations about Dr. Overtree's presentation at the last session. If students are utilized as recorders of peer concerns, regardless of how Dr. Overtree oversees their training, by virtue of their age, student recorders are not in a position to objectively listen, question, and record the concerns of a peer. A student who feels uncomfortable, bullied, or even abused is not likely to confide in another student who is a designated reporter. As well, the peer recorder is now privy to information that might create personal discomfort that will result in a conversation with a friend or a parent. Too much is expected of an adolescent, and if information is leaked, social media is now in the mix. Confidential information is no longer confidential. And my second point, I believe Dr. Overtree said that he works alone. Hopefully, my perception is incorrect. In sensitive areas, we all need another set of eyes to affirm and test our observations. I hope that Dr. Overtree works with a peer who has visual identifiers that are diametrically opposed to his. That other team member must be a woman, given the nature of this task.
Thank you. Okay. Art? Okay.
Well, we do have some new hires and some leaves to announce. Let's start with that.
I think the Zoom people would be happy if you spoke up a little bit.
Sure, thanks. We have some new hires to announce and some leaves as well. We'll start with Kate.
Hi everyone. So we recently hired Ashley Mello to teach 6th grade to fill in for a teacher that will be on leave shortly. So we look forward to her and the experience that she's had and the great energy that she brought forth overwhelming with the committee. We were very pleased with finding someone that we were really happy with this time of year. So we look forward to that.
And then John Sessions at Academy.
I have a request for a leave submitted to Mark Spino by Amanda Paradise, who's a second grade teacher at Academy. I'll just read sections of her letter. The Dear Superintendent Mark Spino, I am writing to officially request a leave of absence for the remainder of this school year. My hopes are that if this leave is approved, it can start as soon as possible. I am requesting this leave to better help the needs of my family due to COVID-related childcare needs. I am aware that a small amount of this leave would fall under FMLA and that much of this leave would be unpaid. Please know that I have every intention of returning in the fall of 2022. I would really appreciate your consideration of this request. I'll say both Kelly Dias and I are in support of Amanda's leave request.
Thank you, John. And for Wendy's benefit, would you say the teacher's name again, please?
Sure, her name is Amanda Paradise.
Spelled like how I think.
No E on the end.
Thank you.
Yeah, D-I-S.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe the board has to approve that.
Yes. So we have a new hire, Ashley Mello, for 6th grade at Green Street School. That motion to welcome Ashley to the team.
So moved.
Thank you. Jackie's motion by Jackie, second by Kelly. Thank you. Moved and seconded to hire Ashley Mello for the 6th grade position at Green Street School. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that's approved. And we need a motion to accept the recommendation of the administrators at Academy School to approve the leave of Amanda Paradise.
So moved.
Who's that?
Liz.
Oh, Liz, thanks, Liz. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you.
Seconded, Thomas.
Moved by Liz, seconded by Tim to approve the leave for Amanda. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the leave is approved. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we also have some Leadership Council recommendations from Keith Lyman and Vance.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we had some new members because the incoming 7th grade, so I would like to have the following folks approved. Maureen Gallagher, Amanda McKinley, Mandy Nash, and Tracy McLean.
Okay, I wonder if you would email those to Wendy, not right this second, but get those to Wendy. It's nice if I have those ahead of time. Oh, she's got them, great.
Thank you.
If we have those ahead of time, so we don't have to scram. Yeah, great. Why don't we do those, and we have some from Guilford as well. I got a note from Barb, I believe, or maybe it's on the agenda. And I also, we didn't approve Steve Head for Putney yet at the last meeting. I guess we don't have to go for the person's name, we can skip. So could we have a motion to approve the new members for the BAM's Leadership Council as presented, and Steve Head for the Putney Leadership Council?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie. Second. Thanks. Thank you, Kelly. Moved and seconded to approve the Leadership Council members as presented. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the Leadership Council appointments are approved.
John.
Thank you.
John Gagnon.
I'm sorry?
John Gagnon.
Oh, John, you might have some information. Go ahead.
Thank you, David. I'm sorry I didn't get my hand up soon enough. The name of the person for the Guilford Leadership Council is Sarah Rosso.
Great. Could we have a motion to approve Sarah Rosso as membership of the Guilford Leadership Council? I think Kelly wants to do that one. A second?
Second.
Oh, thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wendy has her hand up.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sarah Rosso, does her first name end with an H?
It does.
anybody know?
It does, yeah.
Okay, and then Rosso, like Rosso.
ROSOW.
Oh, I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Developmental designs?
That's it for those. So you don't want to touch enrollment tonight?
If you wanted to say something about it, if not, we got it late.
Okay.
And I want to hold firm till we need to get these things in a timely manner so we can review them before we take them up.
Sure.
And that's not going to have any impact on our budgeting, obviously, because there's not much change.
Yeah.
But it's still, I like us to get into the habit of having information before we talk about it.
I'll just speak to a trend of the last 2 years.
Right.
Last year, we were down 109 students during the remote in-person pandemic, and this year we are up 75 students.
109 is, yeah, that's a much smaller percentage than the whole state, in terms of the numbers down last year. It's really pretty impressive.
Okay, so I'll start with a report out on vaccination update and COVID update. And then we have some presentations tonight from Julian Egan, Principal of Dummerston, and John Sessions, Assistant Principal at Academy School. In terms of our recovery update, very exciting news today. We hosted our first vaccination clinic at Green Street School. We had 140 slots, and all 140 slots were filled. It was run by the Vermont Department of Health. Went over for a visit this afternoon, really well organized. It was just kind of an overwhelming feeling seeing your students getting vaccinated in the gym. It was kind of one of those things I've been thinking about ever since March of 2020, like how amazing is it going to be when we're hosting an event like this. So that was just a pretty heavy feeling today. On Friday, there's a vaccination clinic at Academy School. I think about the same number of doses available.
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah.
So I shared in a meeting last week, I can't remember if it wasn't at a school board meeting. Our school nurses have been visiting classrooms, kindergarten through 6th grade, and having conversations with kids and answering questions. And it, on a number of times, been reported to me that kids are really excited to, for the most part, to receive the vaccination. There are some that are not, but a pretty overwhelming amount of kids that are pretty excited, who have felt kind of left out and not being able to have the option until just this weekend. So that's exciting. Another program we're going to move to after Thanksgiving is Test to Stay. So that is, I think I referred to this at the last meeting. Currently, if you're considered a close contact and you're not vaccinated, you would have to quarantine. So what that has looked like at the elementary school is we have been shutting down essentially classrooms due to close contact tracing. By implementing Test to Stay program, if you are considered a close contact moving forward and you are vaccinated for one and you're not showing symptoms, you do not have to quarantine. So that's one of the advantages of vaccination. However, if with the Test to Stay program, if you're considered a close contact, instead of going home for a week, you can come to the school the very next day and take a rapid test. And if that test is negative, you go to your classroom. If that test is positive, then you would quarantine. So Test to Stay, you would do that for 7 consecutive days until you cleared that protocol. I think it's fair to say that we've shut down many classrooms throughout the fall where healthy kids have had to engage in learning at home due to close contact. So it's all about supply and demand. We definitely have the demand. The question is around the supply. Our nurses are working very closely with the AOE, VDH, and the goal is to move towards test to stay after Thanksgiving, unless there are hiccups along the way. Any questions about test to stay or COVID? Okay. So for tonight, we have two presentations that directly reflect our recovery plan as a supervisory union. Julian Egan is going to present around Developmental Designs, which is a program that Dummerston uses to establish school culture, community, expectations, common language, similar to the work that a lot of our schools do around PBIS. So you get to learn about the foundations of developmental design and the work that has been engaged in. So before I do an overview of EST, I would like to turn it over to Julianne to tell us about that work.
Sure, thanks Mark. Thanks everyone for putting this on the agenda tonight. So as Mark mentioned, in our recovery plan, I mean, right at the top under that social emotional learning category, there is the list of activities to reach our goals, and the first is expand the use of PBIS, developmental design, second step, and other school-based SEL programs in order to teach and support the core SEL competencies. And one of the goals, there's a couple of goals associated with that category, but one is that our 2022 Panorama student climate survey data will show a 10% increase in the number of students who report a positive perception of the overall social and learning climate of their school. So part of the reason to talk about this tonight is just to give you a sense of like, what does that look like, what's going on, and what does that look like, and just give you an insight into how the recovery plan is playing out in our schools this year, because this work, as Mark mentioned, is already underway, has been underway, and the recovery plan has allowed us to kind of take a deeper dive into these elements that are so needed right now. So I'm going to share my screen just to show you a few slides. So I talked about developmental designs last year a little bit, and as when we did our school-based presentations, I could talk about developmental designs for 6 hours because I'm such a big fan of it. I actually first was trained in developmental designs. Gosh, it's got to be over 10 years ago now at BAMS. So BAMS is another school who uses developmental designs, and a lot of the high school teachers are being trained in that model now as well. Prior to the pandemic, the Dummerston School Leadership Team was looking at our climate data and was concerned about some of the indicators showing a low attachment to school or a declining attachment to school, which is a significant concern because that attachment to school is an essential foundational element of students' readiness to learn and their experience coming and feeling connected and feeling a sense of belonging is crucial. So we considered a number of programs, and we landed on developmental designs, partly because it's another program used by another middle school in our district. We have a middle school, so that would create a seamless transition into the high school for those students. Also we were looking for a program that could really work pre-K to 8. And other programs might be more suitable for K to 6 and kind of fade 7, 8 in effectiveness. It's really important that you have a program that can work at the middle school level. Developmental Designs initially was a middle school program, and they have slowly kind of backed it up so that it is also elementary based. So that's why we landed on that, and that was even prior to the pandemic. And we made some plans during that year prior to the pandemic to adopt developmental designs and create a plan moving forward. Then the pandemic hit, and we still moved forward, but had to do our training online and change some of our strategies. But just to review some of the concepts I talked about last year, developmental designs is not a curriculum. It's not a set of lessons. There are no workbooks associated with it. Much like when you talk about something like universal design for learning, which you also will see in our recovery plan, it's a set of practices And the reason I have such an affinity for the program is that the set of practices that are promoted by Developmental Designs coincide with my understanding as an educator of what is best practice in education, and kind of what I've learned over 20 years working with young people and studying this issue. So that part of Developmental Designs I really appreciate. It's a way for us to implement a framework and to make sure we're systematizing some of these experiences we want students to have, and we know increase students' engagement at school. So it's based on really a theoretical framework, and that is that students and really adults too need 4 elements in their lives every day to feel part of a community and to feel primed for learning. They need relationship. We as human beings, and certainly our students, want to connect to other people. We also want autonomy to a certain extent, so our students want to have choice. They want to be able to have some independence. We all want to be challenged. We want to feel competent. We want to be challenged in the right way so that we feel like we're learning and growing. And we want to have fun. And we all are programmed for that. So Developmental Designs is not just social emotional learning. It is a concept that is social, emotional, and academic, because the idea is that all of these elements need to be in place in all aspects of a child's day. So when you're planning a math lesson, this is, these 4 concepts kind of need to be in your mind as you're planning. When you're thinking about your lunch period, these kinds of concepts need to be in your mind. When you're thinking about the bus, all of these areas we need to consider what is the whole experience children are having. With Emerson School, we're still new at this, so we're not at the proficient level, we're at the developing level, and we're still working on, wow, how do we assure that we're keeping all these 4 balls in the air and able to say in all of these areas, we're providing this for students. The idea with DD, we call it, is that if you don't provide that, right, if you don't provide structured opportunities for fun, students find, they still will find it, but it may not be in a way that is really what we want to see. It may be in a way that ends up being harmful, for example, to relationships and maybe the learning environment. So that's the concept of DD. At Emerson School, there's some concepts we've been working on. The idea that we have universal morning circle, pre-K to 8. Each morning circle is structured in a similar manner. We have all staff engaged in morning circle, so every staff person, not just classroom teachers, are assigned to morning circle, and different teachers rotate through it. For example, if they're specialist teachers, they rotate through, spending 1 month with one classroom and then moving to another one. So the idea that we want students to develop strong relationships with all adults. DD has a concept called a loop, which is really empowering students to kind of reflect and plan. And every aspect of the day involves students kind of reflecting on how did we do here, what should we do next, really getting students involved in their instruction. And one thing I just want to drill down into today is the social contract. Developmental Designs promotes the idea of developing a school-wide social contract that is student-created, and that's new every year. There's a huge focus on student talk in DD. The idea that the people doing the talking are the people doing the learning. And when we're talking as adults, sometimes we're not actually sure that what we're saying is what's being picked up by the students. And so it's really focused on, the students are the learners and the students are the communicators. The idea with DD2 is that it's moving from coercion to community, that the motivator for students is community. That is the motivator. There is no other external rule, external force that can motivate students as well as a sense of community can when it's done well. It's based on the idea that the best guidelines for a group are those that the group makes for itself. And that when individuals come together to form a social unit, they need to agree to renounce some of their individual rights for the rights obtained in the group. So there's a lot of civics instruction within DD, and a lot of talking among students all the time about, well, what do I need to give up here, for this community to work? And what am I getting out of my relationships here? And how is this actually improving my life to work to resolve a conflict in a way that respects others? So that's kind of, it's different than, say, value statements or visions that sometimes we put on the board every year at school and they stay the same. Often those kinds of statements, I think they're great, but what can happen for kids, after 2 years, kids are like, who made that? Like they, the life of a first grader, by the time they're in 3rd grade, a whole world has changed. And so if you just say to a 3rd grader, hey, this was something that some kids made 2 years ago, you might as well be saying, this was made, in like before the American Revolution. Like they just don't, that's not like a relevant time for students. So the idea of having a student created set of ideals, that is something that gets to be done every year because like all students have to buy in every year. That becomes what's called the social contract. The social contract is a statement of beliefs that the community agrees to abide by. We spend a lot of time having students develop classroom social contracts, and that's where we sort of do the teaching at the different developmental levels of what is a social contract? What does it even mean? What's a contract? And the idea that the contract represents the core values of the group. It's like presented to students as, what do we need? What do we need to create an environment where we all can learn and be our best? What do we all need? And then students agree to abide by the social contract through a consensus process. So they learn about consensus. When they develop their social contract in their classroom, they have to, do different activities depending on the grade. 1st grade, they might be reading some picture books on the topic, thinking about group, how do groups function. They come up with their statements. They all, 1st graders, 3rd graders, 8th graders, they all have to give it the thumbs up. They all have to agree. They bring their social contract to a representative meeting for the whole school. So there's representatives from each grade. And then in that representative meeting, they have to craft really a whole school-wide contract, and that has to be agreed upon. It is a description of ideal behaviors. It's what works in a community. It's not like a big set of rules. It's not what not to do. It's broad and general, and that's something that's interesting, sometimes for adults and for kids, is like, it's broad and general by design. So, if our contract this year says be engaged, that can mean very different things to different people, and that is partly the point, is what do we mean by be engaged? And then that becomes a conversation we have throughout the year. Are we engaged right now? What does it mean to be engaged? It's very concise. It's only 3 to 5 statements, and essentially it becomes really a living document, and it's a starting point for these discussions we want students to be having, these nuanced discussions about broad concepts like kindness, engagement, justice. Those are the things that we want to see them talking about. I can show you this little video was made, I won't show the whole thing, but this was made for an audience of students. This was made by the 1st grade teacher, Beth Montgomery. And I'll just show you these slides. So, oh good, it's not a video, it's just slides. So she made this, we haven't been doing all school meetings because of COVID. We've been doing like grade cluster meetings. So in a normal year, you would bring your school-wide contract to the whole school and have a big signing ceremony. We weren't able to do that. We sort of brought the social contract to our grade clusters. And prior to that, teachers showed students this a little video, about the new social contract with this text, explaining to kids again, like, here's, this is what we talked about, how we wanted our classrooms to look, sound, and feel like. We read some books to get inspired. We brainstormed lists of ideas. then we work to sort those ideas into categories. So here are some, first graders working on the different ideas they had: be kind, respect other things, raise hands, follow the rules, wear a mask. Each class goes through a consensus process to develop their own social contract. So there's some examples from first grade: be safe, be kind, be respectful, be a team, use listening ears. Fourth grade, be safe, have fun, do your part. Getting up into the middle school grades here, you can see all the overlapping concepts, of course. Lots of things about being engaged, be trustworthy and reliable, be yourself. And then we gathered under the tent one rainy morning with the representatives to create a whole school contract. They sorted and talked until they decided on 4 main ideas. And so, we actually went through a process together. And I'll just say, as someone that was working with the guidance counselor to help these representatives, what was amazing about the process is we had printed out all the different values from all the different classes. And I didn't say like, oh, this, we didn't say this is first grade, this is second grade. We just put them all in one big pile. And they were sorting them. And we were trying to think, well, how can we incorporate these all, or what should we do? And there was a second grader named Odin who, we had an idea. He said, look, I see we have these 4 categories. Why don't we just take one from each that best represents? And I looked at him and said, that's an idea. What other people think? And then we tried to work it out a different way. We got to the end of the meeting and the 8th grader said, yeah, what Odin said, that's what we should do. It was like, so the person that really had the answer to us finding the social contract was this second grader who was so, really engaged and really understanding how these ideas fit together. Be kind and inclusive, be positive and work together, be responsible and safe, be engaged. So that was our final contract. And so you can see us sorting. Here's Odin sorting under the tent on the rainy morning. We were grouping the concepts. So then we had the contract printed out, and really everybody signed this. Whoops. Sorry. And you can see here, here's our 7th graders signing the contract. Here are our first graders signing the contract. And now the other piece that we do at our all-school meetings now, or grade cluster meetings, we always use the social contract as our way that we acknowledge students. So we have the student-created, social contract, and then we do acknowledgements at every all-school meeting. So we, highlight, okay, this student was particularly engaged in an example. So every student gets, acknowledged multiple times a year for embracing the student. The social contract, they can acknowledge other students for it, they can acknowledge their teachers for it. So that's one of our traditions. And that's one way that the whole social contract process can work in a small pre-K to 8 school. I know, Keith, you are doing it in a bigger model, and I don't know if you wanted to share about how it's done at BAMS, but it's a little different, but it's got the same ingredients.
Sure. Yeah, we just went through the process of the social contract, and Julianne gave a great description of it. And BAMS came up with their own. We use a student leadership team to, in the student, there's 2 adult leaders of that. So they worked, each advisory in the school worked on it, and they came up with a statement, and we have it plastered all over the school.
Yeah.
And I have it right on my desk, and it's facing where somebody would be sitting if they came into my office and we had to have a conversation about something. So yeah, we always try and loop back to those important concepts that kids have identified. So, and we have them in all the classrooms everywhere. So I don't think we haven't done our signing yet.
Yeah. So one of the other pieces of our recovery plan, and we used ESSER funding for this, is we are having, I'm crossing my fingers that everything works out, but we are having developmental design trainers come on November 22nd and 23rd, and a big part of their work with us is going to be around how do we keep the social contract alive, like how do we make it a living document, like really authentically with kids, to really deepen our understanding of that. What's really neat about them coming is we had a meeting, we have a developmental designs committee, and we met with the DD, one of the directors. The company is called Origins, so one of the directors there met with us to do the planning for these 2 days. And it turns out they're sending the trainer who I was initially trained, so 10 years ago, they're sending the same trainer that I had 10 years ago, who was fantastic. I'm so excited they're sending Scott. I don't know if you've worked with Scott before, but it's like he's, like, I've had a number of development design trainers because I've done a different trainings associated with it, and he is by far, like, he's just great. Like, so I'm like hoping that everything works out and he stays healthy and he can come. He's flying in that Sunday before, and he'll be with us till Tuesday. So we're really excited about that.
That's great.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Julianne. That was amazing.
Any questions from the board? Yep, Tim?
That was a really great presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
A comment, that was a really good reminder of a principle that should be applied at all levels of administration, and that is that those impacted by a decision should be involved in the creation and deliberation of that decision. A voice that's missing in these board meetings, and this is a request to my fellow board members, is a student voice. We don't have a student presence here. We've had it before. That most school boards in the country have some kind of student engagement. I think your presentation was a reminder of January 6th was another reminder that we need to commit to teaching students to engage responsibly in democratic processes. I think what the board can do is engage students in issues that will impact them. For example, the use of ESSER 3 funds. We hear indirectly what the schools need. I think it would benefit our board to have students participating in board members saying, what do you think the ESSER 3 funds should be used directly? So it's, I'm just planting the seed now. I'd like the board to consider how can we have a practical method of engaging students in board decisions. I don't think that it necessarily means that we just have another student representative on the board, but perhaps it would be something like carving out 10 precious moments out of our 2 hours in the beginning for the students to say, this is what is on our minds, this is what's on your agenda, these are our feelings about it. It works at the in the first grade level. I think it can work at the high school level to help the board do its business in a better way, and also to show students that, yeah, we really do believe in a democratic process and we value your engagement.
Thanks, Tim. Michelle?
Okay, sorry, it was telling me I wasn't allowed to turn anything on. Julianne, I just wanted to say thank you, and I can vouch that I don't think you could ever meet a professional who's more excited and genuinely supportive of a program like this. Julianne's enthusiasm is so authentic, and I love hearing you get excited about this person that's coming to do work at our school with our educators, because I see your excitement and it makes me a believer without knowing that much more about the program. I'm curious, I'm able to see as a parent, how this is utilized on a day-to-day, but I'm curious from your experience and all that you've learned, if there's any notable long-term benefits that can be recognized or identified in kids that have exposure to this type of a program in their schools versus not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. The research would say, the research would say yes. The more we have students involved, like we were talking about earlier, like as the communicators, practicing these skills, learning how to have healthy relationships, that work starts at a young age. That work starts right off the bat, in pre-K, and that sets the foundation for later learning. I would say absolutely. The thing too, again, going back to the original point, when we separate social emotional learning from academic, we're missing a real opportunity there. The reality is they are totally intertwined. Like, you can't separate them. So when a student, for example, is sitting through a math lesson and not feeling competent and feeling overwhelmed or unsure, that's a social emotional lesson as well. And there's social emotional opportunities there to support students in, what do I do when I feel this way? How do I ask for help? How do I communicate? How can I work with my peers? And for us as teachers and administrators to think about how are our lessons designed so that we're really using those opportunities to build students' social skills. They're completely linked. So I think that our efforts here are like anything else. The early intervention, kind of early tier 1 programming in this area does make a difference as students move through their grades and go on to high school.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
Let's see if there are more questions.
Sure.
Any other questions or thoughts? Actually, I had a question. It's not for you, it's for John. The description of the circle and the social contract and the moving from course from the community sounds a lot like restorative practices. And I'm wondering, is that coincidental, or is that just whatever the way everyone's doing it, a different name for largely similar programs?
Yeah, there's some overlap for sure. As I was listening to Julian's presentation, I was thinking a lot about the connection between restorative justice, restorative practices in schools, and developmental designs. And I think the overlap is that restorative justice is based on this concept that there's repair that needs to be done to a community, right? And that is based on an assumption that student feels a sense of community to begin with, and that sort of operates on this baseline of a feeling that people are a part of something, and that they then have to repair that relationship. And I think what developmental designs does is it creates that sense of community within the school culture, on which you can have conversations around how you approach a violation of those norms and expectations. But if you don't have that underlying sense of community in your school, then you're asking someone to repair something that doesn't exist in the first place.
Great, thank you. That's an excellent clarification. And Julianne, is this just Dummerston on the 11th, or on the 22nd, 23rd?
Yes.
So the other schools in the district aren't involved in this?
Right.
I have a DD person coming the 22nd. Yep, the whole day exams.
And then the last question is, what happens when the kids get to 9th grade and these structures aren't in place, and they're physically, they're different, almost different human beings than they were when they were in 3rd or 4th grade. How do we scale this? How does this carry into the high school?
Yeah, so Steve's been working a lot with his staff on this, on DD. So DD it's basically pre-K to 12 programming, and so a lot of his staff has been trained, and they've been focusing a lot of their work there. And you're right, they're developmentally very different. But for example, we use this Y chart, looks like, sounds like, feels like, and when we were dealing with the threats and different things at the high school, that was a big piece of how they structured their conversations, was structured through DD kind of protocols. So there's definitely overlap, and the philosophic, the pieces around community advisory is a big piece of developmental designs. And the high school has daily advisor. They don't have daily, but they have advisories. So I think there's a I think it's a lot of work to implement at the high school, or it looks different.
To sustain that same community sense.
Right, and the challenge with these kind of programs that we face is, I have like 35 full-time teachers. The high school, I don't know how many they have. 70 something. So every year you have turnover with staff. So if even one year you do a full training, DD is like a week-long training, and then you really have to work hard to implement it and become proficient as a teacher. And so every year you're having turnover. So that's the constant struggle for us, is keeping everyone on there. And you have that restorative practices or any of the other programs we're implementing. So that's one of the challenges.
I would say at the high school too, the community is like always changing. So in K through 8, they're mostly moving together in the same classroom, not the MITHAMs, but at the high school, there's say 25 kids in one class, the next 25 might be different, right? So that community is always shifting.
Thanks. Any other questions? Any hands up? Anything else? Great, Mark.
Yeah, I'll just say you can't underestimate the importance of setting the foundation of your school year with student engagement around building your community. That was just a beautiful example that Julianne just shared. And every month we work as an admin team to push each other on school improvement. So these are agenda items that we collaborate on. And some schools may have set the standard for what DD should really look like, and we're helping each other to get to that ideal. And that's a similar process with EST, which is the next topic, Educational Support Team. So what we're working to do as a school district leadership team is establish best practice and expectation for all schools. So EST is a system to target and support students and identify wraparound services for not only academics, but behavior and social emotional. And John has done a lot of work around EST. And again, we're working to identify the gold standard, the model that we all agree with at the admin level. And then the goal is, as we move to improve our schools, that we hold each other accountable to that standard. So essentially starting next school year. And the work we're doing as an admin team is to establish what is best practice. Can we agree to this? If this is best practice and we all agree, we need to make the commitment that it's reflected in our schools. So I'm hoping to continue to use these board meetings to highlight elements of our recovery plan and give different principals opportunities to showcase how they're implementing these things in their schools. But just so you understand, our system is we meet on a regular basis once a month for a full day, typically 8.5 hours, and we're working towards pushing each other to improve our schools. So, given that, I'll turn it over to John, and we have an admin meeting this Friday, and we're dedicating at least 2 hours to EST development. But John's going to teach us a little bit more about what EST is.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. I'll also share my screen here. I've just prepared a couple slides to just guide our conversation here. So hopefully that can pull. There we go. So as Mark mentioned, along with social emotional learning, like Julian talked about just previous to this, one of our district's main sort of focus in recovery is educational support teams. And while I'm lead our educational support team at Academy, I'm mostly going to talk about district-wide and just sort of broad strokes around what educational support teams are. Every school in our district has an educational support team that is highly active and engaged in all school years, and especially this school year. I will use a case study of an Academy student to demonstrate sort of the process of what that looks like. But here's what I want to touch on, and I'll just dive right in to what are educational support teams, which are we use the acronym in education as we do with about everything, of ESTs, and what do they do? And so part of this work of what ESTs do is dictated by the Vermont Agency of Education. There is a regulation in Vermont that every school has an EST that sort of serves as this sort of central cog connecting students to various supports within the school community. And so in thinking about what to share tonight, you know, I recognize that we often come to the school board and talk about the need for various supports in our schools, you know, whether it be academic supports or additional behavioral supports or social and emotional supports for students, or the need for school social workers, family engagement specialists, things like that. But we don't often talk about how students get connected to those supports and what that looks like in action. And the central cog of that process is our educational support teams in our schools. And so, you know, the quick diagram there sort of shows that educational support teams are this body of people within a school system that field a concern related to an individual student and match that concern to the menu of supports that are available, which ideally leads to progress towards student well-being in its most low-level form. That's sort of how I would describe it, as a sort of central cog within our schools that connects students with supports. A really critical piece of ESTs is membership and thinking about who is there. So just to sort of step inside an EST team, which generally meet weekly. At Academy, we carve out about 2 hours every week to field referrals and to connect students with supports and problem solve ways to support students. We have a standard team of folks who are always there, so parents are always invited and are most often in attendance. School administration is always present, classroom teachers, school counselors, academic support teachers. Our family support liaison is always there, sometimes referred to as a school social worker, and a school nurse. And then in addition, one of the things that we've been really thinking about this year is how to broaden that team based on the student that we're talking about. And so sometimes the student is being referred because of behavior needs and behavior concerns. And so we invite our behavior interventionists. Sometimes the student has outside supports, whether that be a mental health clinician outside of the school system, or a family friend, or somebody that is a strong support person for that student, so we invite them. And the goal is to create as wide and as deep of a circle around a student so that we can best design and implement supports. We've expanded our community partnerships, which is another sort of priority with our recovery efforts here in our district. And so we often invite HCRS staff, DCF staff. They're often present at some of these meetings in a supportive way to connect students with supports. And so we've also started utilizing our district coaches. And so Deb Cardane, one of our curriculum coordinators, will often come to our EST meetings. Our district literacy coaches and math coaches are there to provide a really high level of academic intervention supports and recommendations for strategies to support individual students as we design a plan. That's that. Here's a quick sort of rundown of how the process works. There's a referral to the educational support team. And at Academy, this referral can come from a variety of sources. It can be a classroom teacher who has a concern for a student. It can come from any other adult or teacher in the building. And this year, we have started to incorporate our own data systems lead to referrals to the EST team. And what I mean by that is, for example, at the end of every month, I look at our behavior data. And any student who has at least 5 behavior referrals has an automatic referral to the educational support team, and it allows us to be proactive in our supports and designing plans. With our efforts to increase attendance and have more consistent attendance, any student who at this point in the year has 10 absences is an automatic referral to our EST team to be able to make a proactive approach to improving their attendance and supporting the family and getting a student to school. So there are times now when our data systems make referrals sort of automatically. So that's a referral. So at that point, a meeting happens. We generally try to schedule as quickly as possible. And we hold these meetings, and these meetings really sort of follow a pretty clear procedure where we hear the nature of a concern, the team asks clarifying questions, we sort of flesh out the nature of the concern, and we get very specific in goals that we want to establish for a student. And we identify the supports and services available within our community, both our school community and the larger Brattleboro area community as a whole, that will help achieve these goals. And then we end that meeting with a concrete EST plan, which sort of documents what our goals are, what services are going to be in place to support a student, and sort of lays it all out. Then is the implementation phase, where this plan is put into action right away. And so what we've identified in that meeting is sort of put in place. We collect data, we look at how students are responding to various interventions, and then we have regular sort of check-ins with the whole team, including the parents around how things are going. And then finally, it's sort of monitoring and following up. These plans are most effective when they're live documents, when we can sort of adjust based on how we're seeing students respond. We generally follow up in our EST team every 8 to 10 weeks, and so we can look at how are students responding. Are they making progress toward their goals? Do we need to change or alter the plan? Or, on occasion, there are times when a student may exit the EST process if they have sort of achieved what we hoped they would, and they're no longer in need of that higher level of support. So to take you through just a quick case study, just a real student at Academy that recently went through our EST system, just to give you some sort of real life examples of what this can look like. So this was a student that was referred by our school counselor who had a wealth of concerns around the student. And the concerns, as I've listed there under the referral category, were lack of engagement in class, work refusal, periodic resistance to come to school. There's a significant concern of well-being at home and food insecurity. And also missed school meant gaps in learning and understanding, which can sort of beget refusal to come to school, because when you do come, you don't have a strong understanding of what's happening. So that's a concern. So at that meeting, so we met a large team. There were about 12 folks involved in this meeting process. We came together. We identified 2 core goals, which first and foremost was to address the concerns of the student well-being around food insecurity. And there were some identified unmet medical needs that were not being addressed. And then our second goal was to increase school attendance and engagement in the classroom. And so you see in the next column here, plan implementation. Our team identified 4 direct services that would be in place effective immediately to support the student. And that was our family engagement coordinator or school social worker was assisting the caregiver in arranging medical appointments to obtain glasses in this particular situation, which included providing transportation to and from medical appointments. We connected the caregiver with community resources to address food insecurity. We also provided the family food from our kitchen. We had services in place to develop social connections with peers through a lunch group with our school counselor that would happen twice a week. And so, we find that sort of related to what Julianne was saying, that sense of belonging, that social connection is a big part in wanting to come to school. And then we connected the student with an academic support teacher during small group intervention times to make up for missed classwork and material. So though that sort of was the system of services that came out of this educational support team meeting to support this student. And then so monitoring and follow-up. You can see what was noted when we did follow up as a team. This was a pretty quick turnaround follow-up because of the severity of the need. But we noted that a lot of these services were successful, and we saw a lot of progress towards goals that had been identified. Increased attendance, better level of engagement while they're there. Academic data showed improved academic performance, and medical needs were addressed and met. So I think this is a good case study that shows, both the importance of teams like this and ways that we as a school can be as proactive as possible in providing really a pretty wide breadth of services that we often talk to you about. And sort of this is what that sort of looks like in action. And the last thing, Mark sort of talked about this, but why are ESTs important and the focus of our recovery efforts? I feel pretty confident I can speak for every administrator here that there's an increase in need, both in the volume of needs, the number of students who are in need of support, and in the diversity of need. And I think that case study is a good example that it's not just academic need that our students are facing. It's not just behavioral support that they need. It's a diverse range of supports that our students are in need of right now. And it's really critical to have a centralized team that can manage that and sort of coordinate that intervention and support. As Mark mentioned, a real priority is creating some consistency around schools within the district, and commitment to a common and best practice. And finally, this also connects to various state initiatives, specifically around Act 173, which has some explicit technical guidance around EST structure in schools, and they really hold that as a core focus as part of that legislation moving forward as a real critical element of schools. So that sort of frames our work as a district, and sort of where we want to head, as Mark was saying, in the next year or so.
Thank you. I see a reference to Dmv Report, and I remember we asked about that at some point. I'm not sure, I don't recall if we had I think we'd asked Shelley to present some information about that. I'm not sure I can't remember, frankly, if that happened or not, but can you say a little bit about what that was and sort of the main findings?
I can't speak really well, David, from a place of knowledge. I know that as the district management group report, there was a team of folks around the state doing an in-depth sort of analysis of initiatives in schools and best practices. I would probably want to defer to Shelley around that.
Shelley, it's not fair to ask her. She's not prepared.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not going to ask her to do that. It's a really comprehensive report, but I think it would be good, put that on the list of things that we do during meetings. That would be great. It's really, it's a very useful report. And yeah, Jackie.
I just have 2 quick questions.
Sure.
I'm wondering how often referrals might come from parents, and then I also wondered, as part of the support team, I would think that there are just maybe some instances where student has a particular staff member or teacher that they really connect with that is just part of the team, just for that
Good
reason,
point.
for the comfort level of the student.
Yeah, very good point. To your first question, referrals don't come from parents very often, to be honest. Part of our work at Academy has been how do we share what EST is and that parents can engage in that process from a referral standpoint. Most often the track would be if a parent had a concern, it would go to the teacher and the teacher would make a referral on a parent's behalf. That does happen. But we would like to see increased parent engagement on the referral side of things. And I think a lot of that is awareness and access. And to your point around a supportive person at the meeting, that's a really good point that I left off. One of the questions in our referral process is who else might be a supportive adult in this student's experience? And it's often previous year's teachers in that particular case. And so they are often at meetings too.
That's ringing really true for me right now, you saying that, it's fine.
Yeah, you know, they're often a really powerful both source of information and also support for the student and family because they have that relationship already.
Excellent, thanks so much.
Just to feedback on John, I think one of the things we need to do better as a school district is the marketing of systems and structures that we do have in place for parents so that they can access those. That came up last night at the Vernon board meeting as well. So those are conversations we'll have to continue to engage in at the admin level as we move towards improvement.
So I'm curious, the center of all this is the student. So I can imagine there are times that the student would be unaware that all these things are going on until at some point where they start to see sort of things happening to help them move through this process. But do you find that there are times when students, some of this might be a comfort to them to understand that there are things being put in place or that there are things on the horizon for them or that sort of thing? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is true that oftentimes students are unaware that these meetings are happening on their behalf, at least at the elementary level. I can't speak as much to the middle school and high school level. But one of the things that I've gotten in the habit of doing at Academy School, and I'm sure others in other schools, is that when a referral is made, my first response is to go to the student. And so I observe the student sometimes, and sometimes I do have that conversation with the student of, how's it going? What would be helpful? That doesn't happen all the time, depending on the situation and the nature of the referral. But when I do take that step, it's really impactful. And so, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, one of the mantras we always use with each other is we really have to determine, we got to give kids what they need. And if a child is struggling, they're not getting everything they need at that moment. And this is a systematic way to recognize that, collaborate as a team, and provide that wraparound service for that child. So inevitably, I feel like students do feel that for sure. The meeting takes place, and the next thing you know, they have 3 more adults in their life on a regular basis supporting them.
Other thoughts? Shelley had her hand up. I believe she thought better of it. But if you want to say something, Shelley, go ahead.
I just wanted to show you that I was here and paying attention.
And I hope you're grateful that I didn't make you do a Dmv report on the spot. I would never.
No, I appreciate that, David. And actually, it does bring it. I don't know. I won't get too far into it, not being in person. But I think to John's point, all of these initiatives that we're tasked with, over the last 5 or 6 years, and now within the context of the pandemic, they're all related. And to Mark's point that he just made about getting students what they need, to John's excellent overview of ESD processes, these are processes that have been, defined by statute for, almost 20 years, if not longer. And I think that what the DMG report really brought into focus, I think, is the need to put students with resources, whether it be staff or outside resources, that are highly skilled and that can provide intervention before getting to the point where myself and our department would come in with needing a special education evaluation. So robust EST processes are so important in providing levels of intervention by highly skilled staff, and to not over-identify students as in need of special education, because what we find with robust EST processes is that these are short-term interventions. And the example John provided of the case study, I think, is an excellent example of that. So I just wanted to comment on that real quick. And always happy to do a DMG review if that is if that's needed for for board communication. You know how much I love talking about DMG.
Thanks, Shelley. Any other questions or thoughts? One of the things that Shelley mentioned about the wanting to have interventions rather than working with the kids before they have to get referred to special ed. It seems like, in this situation where somebody really needs these supports, it's consistent, it's based on best practices, all the things that just had up there, and it just seems like it would be wise to do the same thing on the part that the developmental design aspect of it, the part about blending the social and educational, and creating those groups, all of those things that you talked about. It seems like there should be the same kind of consistency and the same kind of attention to best practices at all of the elementary levels. Because if it's not, when they get to the high school, it's not defeated. It's not like you throw it all away, but it's much more difficult. There's not that consistent understanding.
And that's
it's
really
different than remediation with children that have had really much more challenging experiences that make them need a lot more. But it just seems like there should be more consistency in the social and educational blending that you talked about, Julia. Great to have these kinds of conversations at the board level. Thank you. Tim.
Complementing intervention is prevention. We all know that. And I think in 1992, Vermont passed Aaron's Law, which requires schools to provide sexual assault and abuse prevention and training to all staff and students. So is that in place, especially at the high school, to complement ESD? Do we have sexual assault prevention? Are we meeting Aaron's Law?
Well, every school is required to have what's called Act 1 training each year, which is focused around sexual abuse prevention. So,
short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yep. But I want to speak for Steve. You could lay out exactly how they go about that process to start the school year.
Okay, because I would think that prevention would be the natural complement to intervention.
Yeah. Okay.
All set?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for Julianne and John to represent our team tonight and 2 fabulous presentations.
Thank you. Really helpful. So we have some nuts and bolts left. I hope we can move these fairly quickly. Coming in early to the meetings, I get to hear the last several minutes of the Finance Committee meetings, and they're already talking about the budget development process. But this is our third budget development, and the first two, I don't think I mean, Frank knew what he was doing, but nobody else did, I don't think. We were basically doing a bigger version of what we did when we were six little boys. And so I wanted us to be a little bit more conscious about how we do it this year, and one of the questions that's come up a bunch of times is whether to present each of the elementary budgets, the independent, the unique schools separately, or to put them together if they're all if their what is it called, the developmental, their structure is K6, or if it's K8, have all the K6s put together into one category, and the K8s in one category, and then the 9 through 12 in a separate category, which is more consistent with the pre-K through 12 model that we now have. But a lot of people seem to be interested in hearing about their individual school budgets, so I just wanted us to talk about that and consciously decide whether we wanted to continue to do it that way, or whether we wanted to move to the operating structure model. So any thoughts? Liz, go ahead. You had your hand up ahead of Tim. Liz and then Tim.
Yeah, I really want us to stay with the separate school model, particularly given the concern in our communities about merging our district. I think it also helps, I think it helps each of the schools too. And, if a school is lacking in a program or has an exciting new program, the other schools might not know about it. And it's a learning thing too. But I am really concerned about just putting them all together, particularly in this district.
Tim?
Sure, I'd like to hear from individual schools, but my big concern really is we are a merged district, and how are we acting, how are we budgeting as a merged district? Are we meeting the goals? The voters voted for Act 46. I think they, and I, want to know, are we meeting Act 46 goals? Are we meeting economies of scale? How are we achieving economies of scale in this district, if we are or aren't? Are we sharing resources, including personnel? Are we increasing educational opportunities for students? That was a big reason for merging. Are we doing that? What about a student-teacher ratio? Vermont, in general, doesn't do very good compared to other states in that ratio. Has that helped us in the least bit by merging? So basically, my request is, hear from the individual schools, but I would also think it's important to have a blanket report on how this district is reacting, is meeting the goals of Act 46.
Thanks, Tim. Other board members, please comment if you have a preference, because I don't know how else we decide this if people don't say what they prefer. Jackie?
Would it be appropriate for me to put Mark on the spot and ask his thoughts about this?
No, go ahead.
Sure.
And Frank probably should speak time in too.
Yeah, I would definitely like Frank to speak on this. I think using leadership councils is a great way to dig deep into individual schools. We're trying to build an efficient system here, and each school is meeting regularly in a leadership council, and I see that as a really good platform to have a hyper-focused budget discussion about an individual school. In terms of our budget development process moving forward, I think erring on the side of efficiency, we should use the systems we're trying to establish. So that would be using leadership councils, and then I think Frank would probably prefer more of a holistic, like elementary school look, middle school, high school type look, but balance that with detailed presentations at leadership council meetings. those are my thoughts.
That's a really good point, because I put on the consider asking leadership councils to review school budgets on Tuesday, or no, Wednesday of last week when we worked out the budget, or the agenda. And, but then when the leadership council reports came in, many of them are already in that process of talking about what's in the budget. So it's, that's a really good point. Other thoughts? Emily?
Oh, is Frank first actually? Because he has, I think he has his hand up.
Okay,
He's asked to speak.
Emily wants to hear you first, Frank. Go ahead.
Very well, and by the way, I'd be glad to turn my video on, but it says the host is blocking the video, which is okay with me. You hear me okay, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, I think both folks have made great points. You know, Liz, your point about visibility at the school level is important, and there's no way it would be lost given the structure of our chart of accounts and the required way we capture and present information to the public. So we can kind of revisit part of that. And then Tim, your point is absolutely right on as well in terms of the reason why the legislature put us in this direction that we're in around achieving these goals, as you summarized very, very well. So I think my contribution to the conversation would be that the system, as we have to operate it in terms of data collection and format of presentation, really lends itself to more of a regional system that can be easily broken down by grade level. So that is that continuum of services that Mark was just referring to, you know, pre-K through 12, and the budget will reflect what you've just heard tonight extensively. It will reflect more of a systematic way to deliver educational programs. So you heard John give us a very nice review of EST. Well, you can find the EST investments in the budget development process, and that's what lends itself to really excellent outcomes where we emphasize those successful systems that are resourced. You know, John mentioned social workers. He mentioned the behavioral supports. He mentioned the academic supports. You know, each one of those are categorized in the budget as particular investments, and that's what makes it I think, a really rich and informative deliberative process as we talk about budget development. Back to Liz's point, we still, maybe I'll share my screen just momentarily if you don't mind. You know, here's what's on the website from last year's budget process. So this is just a reminder. We have various levels of information. The one that we lead with is the single page in the annual report that shows us the major investments in direct instruction, student support, you know, facility, and so on. But then we break it down to a more detailed report. It's about 11 pages in the annual report by school site. And then we have this 147-page document on the website, which is the origin of the budget development plan. And here is 3,000 line items by each individual school. So here's just the example of the academy school budget development. And this is where we can connect conversations you've heard from Julianne tonight and from John and the ones you've heard in previous meetings, you know, to specific investments that we track. So, you know, my point is that to be realistic about a budget review process that really engages leadership councils, board, community, between the planning period of November and then when we have to vote in January, late January, to get the legal required documents in front of our voters and get it through the printing, it lends itself, that time constraint lends itself to more of a programmatic review, knowing that we always have the detail at the school level and at the very most minute level available if we need further discussion. So traditionally, it's been quite a successful process of having the finance committee more engaged in the minutia of things like maybe a capital plan or components of the budget, say facility operations and review. You know, are we being efficient in those investments, and are we accountable? Are we consistent with the policy I think it's E14? You know, our commitment to lowering our carbon footprint. You know, those discussions lend themselves to these committees that we have, where we really get into the details. But at the board level, I think it's been very productive. It's been successful in really emphasizing the programs and the systems that you know, you've heard tonight and that Tim was speaking to. So there's my suggestions.
Emily.
So that was really helpful to hear that we would always be able to disaggregate the data. I guess my fear when you had said that, David, was that if we start aggregating everything, it becomes hard to, you know, understand the individual schools, but it sounds like that wouldn't happen. I guess my thinking is that I like the disaggregated data because I can look at it. But I think what's missing at the board level is some way for us to understand the value statements that we're making according to the budget. So I think when you have both the aggregate and the disaggregated data, we can maybe more see that. So I guess in the budget process, I don't know if this answers your question, David, but I would be really interested in looking at the budget according to our values. I think that's a different approach than maybe you're talking about, because what you're saying is like aggregated just, you know, K to 6. I'm not sure how, you know, I feel like every time we come to the budget process, you know, it's like looking at a lot of minutia that's good, but there's no way for us to really say, oh, we're investing in this as a district because like we really value pre-K and this is the direction we're going in. We kind of like timidly step towards things, I feel like, and haven't really, at least in my opinion, as a group, come together around certain values, saying like, this is because we're all also, we merged not too long ago. We were all separate places that had, you know, all different value investments. But I guess I'd love to see a budget where we were starting to talk about the values of the district beyond that, not just the values of the individual schools. I'd like both. They're both important, but I don't know that we've come to that aggregate value statements. Maybe other people feel like we have. I'd love to hear that.
Thanks, Emily. I think that's something, part of what Frank was saying. Yes, Tim.
Emily, if you can see me, I'm like a bobblehead. I was just nodding in agreement with everything you were saying.
The camera just shifted so I can see you now. Oh, good. Okay, good.
Any other thoughts or questions? I think I didn't expect us to really resolve this. I think it's important to have what Frank pointed out, that information is still there available by individual schools, and the communities want to know what's happening in their school or in their community. Will have that. So I don't know that there's any. We don't need to make any kind of significant decisions. Just where do we want the emphasis to be? And I think what Frank described is going to work for now. We'll see how it works out. We'll see what people's responses are. We'll also have the independent budget review committee helping us with some perspective. But for Tim and Emily, please keep what you said in mind, so that as we go through the process, you know, ask those questions again, so that that's what happens. Frank, Liz, and then Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just another way to respond to Emily's comment. I'll do a quick share screen again. Here's an internal document around speaking to what you were raising, Emily, around values and outcomes, goals. So as part of the budget development process, I'll summarize this very quickly, but here are some guiding questions that the central office developed for engagement with our principals, and as part of that, obviously, principals engaging teachers, students, and that community, school community. But these are some guiding questions that we're looking for as the budgets are developed. And it speaks to those core values. And again, most of this, or I would say all of it, reflects what has been discussed at the board meetings over the last, 2 years. You could say 3 years. That first year was so much a formative year as a regional system. But here, what we expect to see is identifying where are the educational resources in the budget plan that are affecting student achievement, specifically marginalized groups. And this is in the context of addressing the response to the pandemic and utilizing the $4 million in ESSER funding for fiscal year 23. So that, the first question. The second one is very much about training and issues around diversity, equity, social, emotional. Again, there are sections of the budget as you were referring to, Emily, ways to disaggregate information. Fortunately, that is a positive evolution of the chart of accounts. It is a 30, I think it's almost a 30-digit chart of accounts, and it has segments. We've gone over this months ago now, but segments of the chart of accounts that does allow us to disaggregate all kinds of data, by program, by grade level, by site, by function, and what's called the object group, salary, benefits, professional services, and then also at a project level. So there's another key focus in our budget development process. Another question, number 3, consensus again on school-wide initiatives, and that's very much where we would want to see the EST activity well-funded throughout each of our individual sites. Student engagement is just such a big sort of investment and an expansion that we are seeing a lot of in various ways, outdoor learning and different approaches to curriculum and assessment and support. And then this question number 5 really gets to those broad systems to assure that we're supporting, as John, again, did such a nice job describing the case study of the way in which all of the various personnel, services, and so on, supplies, materials, all of it it's all inside the budget. And then that last question gets to building a safe and healthy learning environment, which we would expect. You've heard that this is where we're going to be spending between $1 and $2 million a year on capital improvements, leveraging this ESSER money. So just another, little bit of a background on speaking to the values that this reflects, so much of the board's discussion around what we expect in our public schools.
Thank you, Frank. Liz and Michelle, and ask if you could go quickly so we can get to the last couple things on our agenda.
Okay, if we decide that we're going to think about clarifying our goals or our mission, or have some kind of a value statement, I don't know that I would support that. It would have to be very, very broad, because as Frank just said, different schools approach curriculum in different ways. And one of the driving fears around Act 46 was that our schools would lose their distinct cultures. So we have to be really cognizant of that. Right now, they're not in danger with this particular board, but before we start something new, we need to think about down the road as well. So I would just caution everybody to think very carefully.
Thanks, Liz. Michelle?
I will just try to be concise because I'm kind of all over the place and my Zoom froze. I'm not even sure that I was clearly understanding what you were asking as far as what changes we would see as far as separating the school budgets and not having it at this level. But then tapping into what Frank just said about how we can look at more details and what Emily's talking about with values. I just see this overlap, like right in the finance committee. The question I didn't get to ask you, I said I'd email, was looking at capital plan questions. My mind was wondering as I saw things like tractors, like what support does he have to work with people to be supporting our goals with climate crisis and our goals in that district and making sure that we're making the right choices and there's a check and balance there. And so I guess and I don't think there'll be an answer today, but what I'd like the board to be thinking about, maybe we could address, is really how do you perceive the responsibility of the finance committee, and can we be entrusted with some of that responsibility and have that be, what we're overseeing? Is that where we are the check and balance on the board of that committee saying we're looking at this in great detail and we can come back and share, our overall findings and that this is how it feels to us. So just something to think about. And that's what I'm hearing. Our meeting, I couldn't even have time for my last question. It's a full hour. Maybe we would have to meet a little bit more during budget season. But there's certainly a lot of information to pick apart. So.
Thanks. Just a clarification. What I was asking was, do we want to have principals come in and do separate presentations of their school budgets and changes and decisions that they make?
Thank you. Makes so much more sense.
Emily had her hand up, but now it's gone. So I'm going to move us along. The next thing is to consider initiating a 529 college savings plan for all kindergarten students. And Ann is not here. I wanted to turn the chair over to her so I could comment on this, but I'm not sure that she can share from where she is. So I'll just ask other people's thoughts and comments, and then I'll make some of my own. You all saw the article that I sent previous to our last meeting about college savings accounts for all kindergarten students. Any comments or thoughts?
I think it's great.
Tim, I'm sorry?
I think it's very good. I think it would inspire a lot of students who have not been even considering college to think, hey, maybe, as the evidence shows, even a very small amount is an important incentive for a lot of families.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you. Yeah, I've kind of wondered about this and actually had some conversations with Frank about it. The problem I see that it would be a lot of administrative work for 14 years and then for a very small return at the end. And the other thing I would like to say is that, there are a lot of students that don't want to go to college. And so I'm not sure exactly how to resolve that feeling, that there'd be money that the student would be given at kindergarten, but then wouldn't use it, and it wouldn't be available for anything. It would roll back into the general fund. And then, so that kind of gave me a little stumbling block. So, if it was 180 students, which is the approximate number of kindergartners every year, then that would be $18,000 a year. And it would be all those 180 separate accounts that would have to be taken care of and shepherded through for all of the time. And then at the end, the disbursement might be $140. And with colleges costing $35,000, $40,000, it's not going to be a game changer for students. So the other thing too that I would really like to emphasize is that this district has an unbelievable amount of scholarship availability for college-bound students. It's tremendous. It'd be interesting to compare it to other districts, but we have an incredible endowment of scholarships. And that would, make $140 upon graduation and going to any school pale by comparison. So I think that it might be a real, good feel thing, but it might not really work out well in the long run because of the administrative shepherding that you'd have to do in order to shepherd $100 for 14 years and $140 payout to the students that did go to college. So I'm not in favor of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thomas?
Yeah, so overall, I think this is a great idea that I really support. I want to find out a couple details that are kind of important to me. One part is similar to what Sean mentioned. I'm interested in seeing if this can be applied to trade schools, not just 4-year or 2-year colleges. For students who don't want to go to college, they still might want to go to trade school, and this might be a good thing to help. So that's one thing I had, not a concern. I really support the idea. I just, I'm concerned about certain details. I also wanted to see if, I'm not sure if this was brought up in the document you sent, David, but can we have this go through a credit union instead of a private for-profit bank? And what would the fees that this institution who manages it, just sometimes the devil is in the details with funds like this where they charge a lot of fees, kind of similar to what Sean was saying. I'm concerned about any sort of fees that they would be getting off of this and who would be administering it. I'm much more in favor of a credit union handling this since it's a community issue and it's for an education. And the other thing I had was, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So how would parents go about adding to this? And if we could make this more than just a one-time thing from the district, if we could make this an ongoing thing, of course, that would cost more money, but it could also add to the impact for the student when the student gets to graduation. So those are my concerns. Overall, I strongly support the idea. I just want to see some of the details on how it will be administered and what the details are pretty much.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, kind of like what Tom was just saying, I love the concept, but I have a lot of questions, especially around how Vermont does funding. We don't have the privilege of tapping into affluent communities and having a surplus of money. Our money is our yearly education fund. And so we're not like every other state where maybe this original story was implemented from, but I just suspect, I think I think a lot of people would understand the intention and love that concept just like me, but at the same time, begrudge the idea of what does our schools need now and where is that money coming from when we aren't applying it to our students. I know, my husband's got blisters from digging posts at the playground because parents are literally building our kids a playground because we are fundraising. And so I think I can already hear it. I can hear the feedback of, I want buy a slide for my kid's school, and that's proven to support kids, and things like that. So I just think we'd have to have so much community feedback, and I'd have a lot more questions about how we could negate this through our finances and how, with Vermont specific, and how we do a shared education tax.
Liz and then Thomas again.
So, it's a little broader than this, but this feeds into it. The message our kids are getting repeatedly is you have to go to college. You have to go to college. You have to go to college. Well, there's plenty of our kids who do not go to college and do not want to go to college. And those are the kids that I've been worrying about for years now. Because our message is you need to go to college to be successful, whatever that means to somebody. So I think we need to be really, really careful here before we start giving a message to kids who aren't going to college that somehow they're less worthy of our care and our attention and our help in growing up. So I just would like the board to think about that.
Thanks, Liz. Thomas? And then Ann?
I'm wrong on this. I believe that the impetus of this, or one of the first times that this was used was in either Trenton, New Jersey or Newark, New Jersey, a really poor part of one of those cities. It was targeted towards families who have no money, no resources. It was specifically to help really poor families. So that was the idea. I would be interested, like I said, I'm really interested in the idea. I would like to see how it's worked out so far and just how we work it, but it's a fantastic idea to me.
Thanks, Thomas. Ann?
Hi, a 529 plan can be used to pay for trade school. I don't know about students who would do neither.
Thanks, Ann. Any other?
David?
Yeah.
Just, sorry, one more comment. I'm sensitive to what Liz said. I agree that there is stigma attached to people who don't go to college. At the same time, we know that 70% of people, of kids born into poverty, stay in poverty. The game changer is, for many, is higher education. Higher education has benefits that go beyond profession, income, health, marriages, less incarceration. Higher education is a good thing. I would want to not just support this, but complement it with some kind of kids to college program, which are also very successful across the country, where families who never conceive of going to college, it's a foreign land, it's a foreign territory. A kids to college program takes elementary school kids and brings them to UVM or Castleton and says, yeah, this is an option that you can have too. So I'd like to explore kids to college programs as well as this.
I'm going to read some of the quotes from which I think are the really crucial quotes, and they address some of the questions, and then Frank has a comment as well, but I'm going to do this part first. These accounts are meant to use a modest investment to help set every child on the path to education beyond high school, not just for college, but as Ann said, for apprenticeships and for trade programs as well. It's money that enables them to get education after high school. The value exceeds the mere dollars. Even small sums in dedicated college accounts can significantly increase a child's likelihood of pursuing higher education. The money is generally invested in a state-run 529 college savings plan, which families are participate in. The district is not running it. The school administration is not tracking that down. It's not extra work once the accounts are set up. Where earnings grow tax-free over time, withdrawals are free of income and capital gains taxes as long as the money is used for eligible expenses associated with higher education or career planning. The fees on these, I don't even know if there are fees on these 529 plans, but they'd be insignificant, and we can answer that question. State and local governments, as well as school districts and nonprofit groups, set up these programs intending for them to become not only part of the classroom conversation, but also part of the community fabric. With the account infrastructure in place, it becomes easier for local groups, corporations, and others to direct money to local students, experts said, particularly those students with fewer resources. Colorado, Illinois, Nebraska have passed this legislation. Pennsylvania, Maine, Pennsylvania's Keystone Scholars Program, created in 2018, is one of the largest statewide programs that automatically provides newborns with $100. Proponents believe that automatically starting accounts ultimately contributes to narrowing the wealth gap. William Elliott, a professor of social work at the University of Michigan, found that even modest accounts make a child 3 or 4 times as likely to pursue higher education. And I quote Dr. Elliott, "But I don't want to lose track of the fact that one of the really important things this kind of programs do is to provide the infrastructure to transfer wealth to lower income families. Families are encouraged to take a series of steps to earn more, activate the account. They have to activate the account. They open their own 529 account. They can link it to a scholarship account and deposit money of their own into them as well. The main question that people have most of the time is, what do I have to do? And the best part of it is, you can, if these programs are in place, you can tell the people your child is already enrolled just by being in our school system. So what I'm suggesting by this is that we ask the administration to look into this and indicate how much it would cost and what the responsibilities would be for the school district, and try and see if we can get it into this year's budget. So I don't know how the board wants to proceed. If you want a motion at this time, or if you want to wait and talk about it again at the next meeting. Well, we'll hear from Frank, and then we're at 8:01, so we have to move on. Frank, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I did look into this. These are great points everybody's made. And I absolutely agree that the concept does increase student access and awareness of post high school educational programs. But what I'm finding is I reached out to VSAC because they're connected to higher education through high school guidance counselors and so on. I asked them about the program administration for 529 plans, and they gave me quite a bit of detail around the background, and there are pretty significant challenges for a school district to administer. I looked into a little bit more detail on that article you shared, David, with the board on the New York City schools. It actually was set up by the governor's office. In New England, there are no public schools that are sponsoring the 529 plans. It's an IRS section 529. However, in Maine, the one you referred to, very interesting, that was set up by the Bass Family Foundation, so that the wealthy Bass Shoe family funded $500 for every Maine newborn child 5 years ago. Some of the disappointment there is only 46% of the families have even applied for the $500, and unfortunately, VSAC is sharing this with me that it's disproportionately more of the middle class families, and it's not the target group that we really want. We don't need to get into all of the details because I know you want to move on, David, but what I would say is the main question I think the board wants to consider is who is the administrator of the 529 plan. If the school, and this is why public schools haven't done it, if the school associates itself as the account owner, then there is a tremendous amount of reporting and monitoring and follow-up, as Sean referred to, and some of those questions I think other board members have raised. It's designed to, the account owner cannot be the student. It's designed for the account owner to be either a parent or a grandparent or someone, some kind of a guardian of the student. And so the way in which it's set up really dictates a lot of the details that some of the questions that were raised tonight. And for the school district to be the sponsor, there's no clear path how to make that work. The alternative is to link families with the state agencies, in some, as you just referred to, David, many of the sponsors are the state, the legislature. And that really opens up the door to plan administration. Who issues the quarterly statement? How much are those fees? Who's the investment manager? Who enrolls the kid? And who manages the application process? Those things can be partnered. VSAC said they don't have the capacity to do that for an entire school district right now, but they're very intrigued by this conversation that the Brattleboro and the Windham Southeast Board is having, and they asked me to kind of, keep them posted. They are the administrator for 26,000 529 plans in Vermont, but it's that direct relationship between the parent and or the grandparent, but in no instance is it between the school district. So I can provide more background on that. VSAC said they will also contribute to our ability to open this door. But I think it's way too early to try to get the school linked to as the sponsor of this program in this budget cycle. It's just VSAC said they don't have the capacity to take that on. We certainly don't either in terms of being a program sponsor. But I agree with the premise. No question, it's an excellent incentive and a program for supporting kids, and the school's role could very much be a way to increase the awareness and help them get connected with the resources that make it easy, as you say, make it really easy for them to access. So, Chris.
Thank you, Frank.
That's what I meant.
Obviously really useful information. Well, I'm a ready, fire, aim guy in the first place, but you also know that no school district had contracted to be an off-taker from a new solar array in the state of Vermont before we did it. And nobody knew how to do it, and nobody said it could be done. And we wound up getting our attorneys to develop the contract, and we're the first municipality to do that. So I hope we'll be the first to figure out how to do this. And so thanks for that help, and I'll be in touch with you to figure out how we can follow up and work with VSAC and see how we can make this a reality. Because it's just the value to kids to realize that they have that they have some options in their future. It's just too big to not find a way to make it work. So thank you. It is 8:07. There's nothing left that we have to deal with. Oh, there is. Sorry.
David, can I offer one quick statement?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just another way to look at it would be, I think the concept is incentivizing motivation. And before you go to college, you have to graduate high school. Another way to look at it may be a gift upon completing graduation. So rather than track an account for 13 years, you provide an acknowledgement of congratulations, you graduated.
And here's a check.
District, correct?
Yeah, the lesson in that, though, as opposed to the lesson of watching a fund grow over a decade or more, is lost, though. We do have one other thing that we do have to do tonight because they're meeting on Thursday. The voters of the district created the Independent Budget Review Committee. We have volunteers from all 4 towns. I'd like to do brief bios and then get us to, as the article described, get us to approve the volunteers. And then at the annual meeting this year, we'll elect them from the floor, and we'll do that from now on. So the volunteers are from Putney, Casey Murrow, who has experience with budgets through the startup of 2 for-profit businesses and 2 nonprofit 501c3. He provides leadership today via Synergy Learning International Incorporated, which is a professional development provider with multiple projects underway. He serves on the board of Shelburne Farms and the Vermont Higher Education Collaborative. He was director of the Vermont Learning Collaborative based in Dummerston for 15 years. Prior to that, he taught at Wilmington and was an associate professor at the University of Vermont. Barbara Sharkey and her husband have lived in Brattleboro for 4 years. Both of their children attended Brattleboro High Public Schools and graduated from BUHS. Their granddaughter is now in her senior year at BUHS. She holds a degree in accounting from UMass and was a New Hampshire licensed CPA and a management professor at Keene State College until retirement in 2017. Maggie Foley from Guilford has been working with nonprofits in Windham County for close to 2 decades. Her area of expertise is fund development, experience with budget development and monitoring, grants management, and establishing and managing donor-restricted capital and endowment funds for organizations with annual budgets up to $70 million. She now serves as a consultant to nonprofits with a focus on fundraising, board development, and strategic planning. She attended Guilford and Brattleboro schools growing up, is parent of a Guilford Central School pre-kindergartner and a BAM 7th grader, and currently serves as vice chair of the Guilford Leadership Council. And Christina Naylor is a former member and chair of the Dummerston Board. She is the owner and manager of Side Hill Farm. She was the school district, this Windham Southeast School District chair during our formative year. She was a member of the Act 46 Design Committee and the Alternative Structure to Act 46 Design Committee. And she's worked on lots of budgets, and she would be the Dummerston representative. So I would ask for a motion to approve these four to be our independent budget review committee by acclamation, or under an inclusive motion to approve all four.
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie. Second by Kelly. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee members as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? The motion passes. So, Ann?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Was that Liz?
Yeah.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn at 8:11. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.